So we're here in the 2026 NFL offseason, and we're going to see a lot of trades go down over the next 2 weeks. We already saw one go down between the Jets and the Titans, Tavondre Sweat for Jermaine Johnson. So for today's video, ahead of the Combine, I wanted to talk about the big trades that went down last offseason in 2025 and grade those deals 1 year later. So we're obviously using the power of hindsight today. How did these guys perform in their first year with their new teams? Are they even going to be on these new teams again this upcoming season, or was the trade so bad it's a one and done? And also, some of these trades involved a lot of draft capital, so it's still kind of TBD to see if they hit on these picks, but we're just going to kind of look at hindsight here and see if it was the right move or not going forward. So we're going to start off with one that involved the Super Bowl champions, and it was them actually trading away their starting quarterback of the 2024 season, Geno Smith, to the Las Vegas Raiders for the 92nd overall pick in the 2025 draft, which the Seahawks then used on a backup quarterback in Jalen Milroe. Now, automatically, we know that the Seattle Seahawks were able to sign Sam Darnold because they traded away Geno Smith, and Sam Darnold just helped them win the Super Bowl, which is the goal for every team every single season. So I'm giving this trade an A for the Seahawks, not because they really hit on this draft pick yet. It's Jalen Milroe. He might never even start a game for the Seattle Seahawks, at least on his rookie contract, because they have Sam Darnold under center, but it allowed them to feel comfortable to give Sam Darnold over $100 million in free agency and kind of realize that we hit the ceiling with Geno Smith as our starting quarterback. We got a lot younger at the quarterback position. And like I said, they won the Super Bowl, so it's hard not to give Seattle an A for this deal. And for Vegas, I have to give this one an F. I think this was a big trade that a lot of people were wrong about, including me. I didn't mind this for the Las Vegas Raiders. I watched Gardner Minshew, Aiden O'Connell, and Desmond Ridder throw the ball for Vegas in 2024. So I'm like, yes, let's go. We got a competent quarterback in Vegas. They now have a higher floor this season. They can win 8 or so games. That did not happen. The Raiders were the worst team in the NFL. They go 3-14. They have the #1 overall pick this year. I have no idea if Geno Smith is going to even be on the roster next year either. Geno Smith, as the starting quarterback for the Raiders last year, had a 2-13 record. He led the NFL in interceptions with 17. He also signed a 2-year, $75 million extension with the Raiders after this trade happened as well, an average annual salary of $37.5 million. He still has a noticeable cap hit in 2026 for $26.5 million. So Vegas may just keep him to be the backup for Fernando Mendoza, or maybe they actually go the strategy of letting Mendoza sit for a little bit and Geno starts the first few weeks. I don't really think that's a good idea either. Yeah, you got to give an F. I'm sure Vegas would have liked to have that 3rd round pick back. They got that in the Devontae Adams trade, but they kind of wasted it on Geno Smith and a lot of cap space as well, and it was an embarrassing 2025 season. But hey, if Mendoza is a Hall of Famer one day and Geno Smith was the reason they got Mendoza, we can retroactively trade this to an A+ for Vegas. The next trade that I want to talk about probably involved the best player that we're going to talk about out of anybody in this video, and this one went down so late in the offseason. It was basically right before the season started, August 28th, 2025. The Dallas Cowboys decided to trade one of the best defenders in the NFL, Micah Parsons, to the Green Bay Packers for a 2026 first-round pick, a 2027 first-round pick, and Kenny Clark. Now, we definitely saw the ramifications from this trade for the Dallas Cowboys. They could not generate any pass rush this season. They had one of the worst defenses in the NFL, and it really exposed their secondary a little bit more because these quarterbacks had so much time to throw. There was nobody rushing the quarterback, and teams could really just outmatch Dallas's defensive line every single week. Honestly, until proven otherwise, I'm giving Dallas a D for this trade. Now, yeah, they maybe look a little bit better. Micah Parsons tore his ACL last season. He did sign the largest deal in the NFL, 4 years, $186 million for a defender, $44 million signing bonus, $136 million guaranteed. That's $46.5 million a year for an edge rusher. But Micah Parsons might not even be in his prime yet. He's 26 years old. Edge rushers can age well in the NFL, and he had 12.5 sacks throughout 14 games. He was on his way to being an All-Pro first-team member. Probably wasn't going to win Deebo because of what Myles Garrett was doing in Cleveland, but this trade looked like a slam dunk for the Packers, who desperately needed this elite edge rusher, maybe their best one since Clay Matthews all the way back. And Dallas has yet to use this draft capital so far. They have the 12th overall pick, which is their first rounder. They have Green Bay's first rounder at 20. We'll see if they just take an edge rusher, and they traded away one of the first round picks here. It's basically a swap best with the Jets in 2027 in the Quinnen Williams trade. So you could look at it at the lens that they got got a first rounder, Quinnen Williams, and Kenny Clark, who's probably not going to even be on the roster next year either for Micah Parsons. I'm still giving Dallas a D. We'll see who they end up taking with the 20th overall pick this year. And Kenny Clark really wasn't great for the Dallas Cowboys last year either. And I'm going to give Green Bay an A for this deal. I mean, ACL tears can definitely hurt your speed, your burst a little bit, but in 2026, ACL tears are not going to hinder your career. They're not going to derail it whatsoever. It's not the same injury it used to be in the past. Parsons should be ready early in the 2026 season, and I still think it's going to be a Pro Bowler every single year. He's going to be flirting with DPOY and All Pros every single season, and is still just 26 years old. So A for Green Bay, D for Dallas. If they hit on the 20th overall pick and Quinnen Williams is an All-Pro member next year, maybe I can retroactively bump this grade up, but for now, I still don't really agree with it in hindsight. So I was just kind of a little bit mean to Dallas. I'm going to be nicer to them here. I'm actually going to give them an A+ for this deal. They traded for George Pickens, who they just franchise tagged today. They traded essentially a 2026 third rounder and a 2027 fifth rounder for George Pickens, who was just an All-Pro second team member in 2025. I don't think anybody had those type of expectations for George Pickens this year. Now, people thought that he could be an extremely high-end wide receiver 2 next to CeeDee Lamb, but nobody really knew that CeeDee Lamb was going to get hurt this year, and Pickens rose to the occasion as a true wide receiver 1, 93 catches, 137 targets, 1,429 yards, 9 touchdowns as well. Yeah, this is an easy A+ for Dallas. You gave up a day 2 pick and a day 3 pick for one of the best receivers in the NFL last year, who's still just 24 years old. They're going to tag him. We'll see if there's some type of long-term extension that Pickens is going to play under going forward. This is extreme value. Dallas traded a 4th rounder for Jonathan Mingo a couple years ago. We've seen Adam Thielen go for a little bit less than this. We've seen guys like Jacoby Myers or Rashid Shaheed, good receivers, go for something in this ballpark, and they got George Pickens, one of the best receivers in the NFL this year. So it's an A+ for Dallas. For Pittsburgh, I'm going to give this a D, just because I think we all know that if George Pickens was in Pittsburgh this year, the numbers weren't going to look that good. The Steelers do not have the type of quarterback play that the Dallas Cowboys have. The Steelers will have the 76th overall pick from Dallas in this year's draft. Hey, not the worst pick in the world. It's the 12th overall pick in the 3rd round. We'll see if the Steelers are able to hit on maybe a receiver or something else with this pick. They're notoriously well at drafting wide receivers, and that's why they felt like it was the right move to move on from George Pickens. Now, they ended up with another receiver this offseason, which we'll get to later in this video. But for now, for Pittsburgh, it's a D. He wasn't going to have this season in Pittsburgh, but if you look at this production, like, this is a 1st round pick receiver. Like, if the Cowboys traded away George Pickens this offseason, they're demanding a 1st round pick. So in hindsight, maybe the Steelers didn't get the fullest value of George Pickens. And then kind of a shocking trade here that happened in the 2025 offseason. The Kansas City Chiefs trading away Joe Thuney to the Chicago Bears, one of the longest tenured Kansas City Chiefs who's been a part of multiple Super Bowl rosters, for a 2026 4th round pick. Yeah, this is an A+ for Chicago, and it is a D for Kansas City. Joe Thuney has had a great career so far. He's a 4-time Super Bowl champion with the New England Patriots and the Kansas City Chiefs. He was a starting interior offensive lineman for the Chiefs 3 straight Super Bowl run in 2022, 2023, and 2024, and he started basically every single game of his career. He's barely missed any time in his 10-year career. He's been extremely healthy. He's 33 years old, and the Bears were like, we need just any upgrade on the interior offensive line. So they take a chance on the veteran. The Chiefs are looking to sell maybe high on Joe Thuney as a 33-year-old. Well, he just won the NFL's inaugural Protector of the Year award. Yeah, the best offensive lineman, the new award this year, went to Joe Thuney of the Chicago Bears, and was a huge part of Ben Johnson's offense there in Chicago this season. That's why it's getting an A+. Like, the season George Pickens just had for a receiver was basically the same season Joe Thuney just had as an interior offensive lineman with the Bears. He was an All-Pro 1st team member this year. He was a Pro Bowler, and they gave up a 4th round pick. Now, interior offensive linemen do not hold maybe as much positional value as some other positions in the NFL, so maybe they weren't going to get a 1st round pick if you saw Thuney have this type of season, but this could have went for a 2nd rounder, maybe a 3rd rounder, and we'll see who the Chiefs end up drafting with this pick going forward, but it's going to be hard to justify the value that you just gave up. The Chiefs offensive line wasn't great this year. We know that they had to tag Trey Smith last offseason, but this looks like a bad move, Brett Veach in hindsight, and a really good move from Ryan Poles. So the Pittsburgh Steelers were on one with trades last offseason. I'm not even getting to that wide receiver trade that I'm going to talk about in a little bit. This one happened kind of later in the offseason. It was on June 30th between the Miami Dolphins and the Pittsburgh Steelers, and this was essentially a a Madden trade. Player for player trades that you don't really see happen too often. The Pittsburgh Steelers traded away Micah Fitzpatrick and a 2027 fifth rounder for Jonnu Smith, Jalen Ramsey, and a 2027 seventh rounder. And I don't think this was really a lopsided trade either in hindsight, because Jonnu Smith, you could say, was honestly a negative for the Pittsburgh Steelers this year. The Dolphins go from a seventh rounder to a fifth rounder in the 2027 draft, which should be a stronger class. But I will say that the Steelers got the better end of the high-end players dealt in this trade. I think Jalen Ramsey was better than Micah Fitzpatrick this year. Now, when you're watching those two secondaries, Micah Fitzpatrick did not have as much talent in that secondary that Jalen Ramsey had. I'm not saying that the Steelers secondary is elite, but Joey Porter Jr., James Pierre, Deshaun Elliott, these guys are a lot better than the secondary that Miami trotted out this year. So I'm going to give this trade a B+ for Pittsburgh, because Jalen Ramsey was arguably like a top 3 player on the Steelers defense this year. Definitely their most impactful player, I would say, in the secondary. And Micah Fitzpatrick was still solid enough in Miami. He's still a good leader. He's a great vocal player in that secondary, where they're going to get a B-. So it's very close. I think the Steelers slightly won this trade, because Ramsey, I think, is going to age fine into his 30s, playing more safety. He had 3 sacks this year for the Steelers. He had 1 interception. He had a bunch of big hits this year. He had 8 pass deflections, and he was a Pro Bowler. And hey, Pro Bowler can go to anybody now, but I don't think Jalen Ramsey was also dealt any favors with Mike Tomlin calling plays defensively, or Terrell Austin as well. They do not have forward-minded thinking defensive coordinators giving Ramsey a shot or adjusting the secondary either. As Micah Fitzpatrick this year did have an interception. He played 14 games. He had a sack as well. He had 6 pass deflections and a forced fumble. It feels like Miami's going to trade away Micah Fitzpatrick this offseason. I doubt Pittsburgh moves on from Jalen Ramsey. So yeah, a B+ for Pittsburgh, a B- for Miami. I think it's almost a win-win trade. Another wide receiver trade that happened in the offseason involved the Washington Commanders and the San Francisco 49ers. Adam Peters, the new executive in that Commanders front office, reunited with a player that he brought in San Francisco. They traded for Deebo Samuel for a 2025 fifth round pick that ended up being Jordan James. Now I'm going to give this trade a B- for the Washington Commanders and a C for the San Francisco 49ers. You could say that Deebo Samuel was maybe the most impactful Commanders offensive player this year. There was the injury and holdout to Terry McLaurin, who had an underwhelming 2025 season. I mean, the Commanders offense as a whole was extremely underwhelming in 2025, but I would say Deebo Samuel was still a solid player for them. In about 12 games that he started, he had 99 targets, 72 receptions, 727 yards. He averaged about 10 yards per reception. He had 5 touchdowns, and then he also had a rushing touchdown as well. Now, Deebo Samuel at 30 years old is not the player that he used to be, but I would say he was still a positive player for the Washington Commanders this year, but just everything was underwhelming. Offensive line, Jaden Daniels got hurt a ton. They didn't really have a consistent running game whatsoever. It feels like Deebo Samuel is going to be on a different team moving forward. I'm giving this a B-. You can honestly be a little bit harsher to this deal just because of what you had to pay Deebo Samuel and him being a little bit on the older side, and that's not what the Commanders needed in hindsight in that 2025 offseason. And then for the San Francisco 49ers, they're getting a C. They saved up some long-term money, which I think is the positive value here, but they took Jordan James, who is still young. He's still just 21 years old and appeared in 3 games as a rookie. He played at Oregon in the 2024 collegiate season. We'll see if he gets any more runtime next year. We'll see if the 49ers add a running back this offseason. Brian Robinson could be gone, so maybe there is a path for Jordan James to back up Christian McCaffrey next year, and it's going to be an even number year, so maybe McCaffrey might miss a little bit of time, and Jordan James might be called up to the occasion, and if he performs well as a former 5th round pick, this retroactive C could go up a little bit in this trade. Second to last trade, we're going to talk about another Pittsburgh Steelers trade. Yeah, you can know what this one is at this point. It's DK Metcalf going to the Pittsburgh Steelers with a 6th rounder. The Steelers used that on Will Howard, and then the Tennessee Titans acquired the Pittsburgh Steelers 2nd rounder, which they actually used to trade up in the draft for Nick Emenwari, and they also ended up with Damian Martinez as well, the former running back out of Miami who did not play at all for them in the 2025 NFL season. So yeah, we'll start off with the Seattle Seahawks here. This is definitely an A for them. You could honestly give them an A+ for this deal as well, and I'd be perfectly fine with that because they were able to now make JSN the full-on wide receiver 1 for this team, and JSN was just the best statistical season receiver in 2025. He won the Offensive Player of the Year award. He's probably going to set the market at the highest amount for an NFL wide receiver contract in 2027 when that deal fully kicks in. The Steelers also had to give DK Metcalf a very large contract. It was about $130 million across 5 years. He was the 4th highest paid receiver in 2025, and he did not put up those type of numbers. DK Metcalf appeared in 15 games. He got suspended for the Steelers down the stretch, throwing a punch at a fan in the Detroit game. DK Metcalf in those 15 games had 99 targets, 59 catches, 850 yards, 6 touchdowns as well. I mean, the Steelers' offense is underwhelming. He's in that Arthur Smith system, which does have a limited ceiling, it feels like. But DK Metcalf had some really bad drops and did not play like a true wide receiver one. He's still 28 years old. We'll see how he looks in year number 2. Me, as a Steelers fan, hope it's a different quarterback throwing to him, and hopefully Mike McCarthy's offensive system could be a little bit nicer to DK Metcalf and his numbers next year. But the fact that the Steelers gave up a second rounder, could have taken Nick Immanwori, or at least used that pick to trade up, and they could have also saved $30 million a year and maybe just play George Pickens as the wide receiver one. Probably would have looked like a better deal in hindsight. So I'm giving the Steelers a C. This could honestly drop if DK Metcalf does not have a good season next year. And I'm giving Seattle an A. Maybe I'm being too nice to my Steelers, and you can honestly give them a D for this trade, and you can give Seattle an A+. So let me know what you think down below. The Seattle Seahawks had a very good 2025 offseason, as we know. They just won the Super Bowl. And then the last trade we're going to talk about is another offensive lineman one. This one was also a little bit of a shocker as well. That happened early in March between the Houston Texans and the Washington Commanders. The Texans traded away Laremy Tunsil and a 2025 fourth rounder, which ended up being Jalen Wayne, to the Washington Commanders for a 2025 third round pick. Ended up being Jalen Knoll, a 2025 seventh rounder that ended up being traded on the night of the draft. And then the Texans ended up with Jalen Reed, a safety out of Penn State, with the 187th overall pick. But the Texans also have a 2026 second rounder and a 2026 fourth rounder from the deal as well. So I did not love this deal when it happened for the Houston Texans, but honestly, in hindsight, I think it's aged fairly well for them because the Commanders were bad in 2025. So now this is the 38th overall pick for the Texans. So I'm going to give Washington still a slight edge in this deal because I thought Laremy Tunsil was good for Washington last year, and I don't know how bad the season could have gone if they didn't have Laremy Tunsil. So Washington is going to get an A-. Houston is going to get a B+ in this deal. But honestly, if you wanted to make these grades the same, I'm perfectly fine with that. We still have to wait and see who Houston takes with the 38th overall pick and the 106th overall pick. But it's nice that they have a decent amount of draft capital for this class to maybe add to that offensive line, add a running back, or just maybe anybody on that offensive unit. Who knows, maybe a quarterback on day 3. But I think this trade didn't really work out super well for the Texans last year. I still think they missed Tunsil a little bit, although the offensive line did improve. They have a chance to kind of right that wrong in this year's draft, so it will be a noticeable one for Nick Caserio and that Houston Texans front office. And I don't think Laremy Tunsil is going to fall off a cliff anytime soon. He's 31 years old, but this guy was legitimately a #1 pick talent back in that 2016 draft, and we know why he ended up falling in that draft, but he can just age, I think, super well, like a Trent Williams or like a Teron Armstead for Washington over the next few years. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know if you did by dropping a thumbs up. Let me know if you agree or disagree with any of my grades down below, and you can let me know why as well. Subscribe, because we're going to be doing a ton of draft combine content this weekend. I'll have my draft combine winners and losers, and then we'll also do a post-draft combine mock draft on Monday as well. So make sure you are subscribed. I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.